Welcome back to another basic and I guess to advanced video tutorial on hitboxes and all the shabam, how you can actually set up that stuff. And this is just mainly for beginners, and of course I'm going into some a little bit more advanced stuff, because this stuff is basic knowledge which you definitely need to understand. The difference between, let's say, of your GameMaker Studio regular collisions, which are very beginner friendly, to some more advanced collisions which demand a little bit more knowledge about the game, but then going through all the stuff so you actually understand what's happening, because there are some regular collisions which GameMaker Studio quite conveniently gives you, and of course there are some which you have to do with a hitbox, which is in the end just a detector which is your own stuff. And it has, of course, some advantages to know both approaches. One can be actually kind of a, not a lazy approach, but let's say a more easy approach. And the other one is more for advanced ones, because there you can actually do some really cool stuff, which is kind of important to understand for, let's say, a little bit bigger projects than one enemy and one player. So if you need to know this, stay tuned. This is One Up Indie. I am the developer of the indie game Clunky Souls and a programmer / pixel artist. So if you are new here and you definitely want more, consider subscribing to my channel, because I try to upload every day or every second day a video and share my stuff. And I didn't upload the last 2-3 days because I was kind of busy doing my own game, so I wanted to focus some of my time on that. And tomorrow I will do a devlog, because I had to do some really hard decisions concerning what I can put in and not. So if you are interested in this, well, here we go. And of course for my Patreons, this was a Patreon request to do, so here you go buddy. And I will do the top-down first prototype. You will see it in a very late evening, or very late night rather. So let's jump into the stuff. So what is a hitbox? A hitbox is in the end not too special in my opinion. It doesn't, it's not too difficult or too, come on, zoom correctly. It is not too different than, for example, the inbuilt stuff. So the inbuilt stuff is basically, if you, let's say you're having a player, this is this axe-wielding berserker murderer guy, and then this very innocent green thing, which is just a trustworthy thing to be slaughtered on the way. And then this guy throws his axe and bam, destroys it. So normally, and this is the beginner friendly stuff, what you need to understand is every object has, of course, if you set it up, a sprite assigned to it. And then it has some bounding boxes, and for example, let's say there are 4 points, and that's why it's called bounding box. And as you can see, everything has it. So let's say, for example, the bearded murderer guy has it, and of course the axe has it as well, because, well, this is how it's being set up. And of course here this guy has his bounding box as well. Of course you can set it up. So let's go, for example, into GameMaker Studio, and let's say you're just having a pretty much empty object. Then you assign your sprite in here, and then of course you can actually modify it, so edit sprite, bam. And as you can see, normally this is being automatically filled. So basically it's trying to grab around a box, which is the bounding box. And then of course you can manually full image, or manually you can change those points here, bam bam bam. Then for example, only a collision will occur in this rectangle. Of course you can do this with those points here as well. You can do that, but I prefer the drag and drop. This is easier. So this is kind of important to understand. So basically what is happening here, this bounding box, let's see, draw it so it actually looks better. And I have chosen the green color because this is an inbuilt thing, therefore beginner friendly. And let's say, for example, you're flying in and you're having a collision with one bounding box with the other one, and here's where the action is kicking in, And maybe you want to do something. Let's say you want the X to disappear, and then hurt this very friendly green guy here. Or you want to knock him back or something, you know, there are different ways, but I just go show you the approach how you can actually do this. So let's say you are throwing that object. So this is the bullet projectile, you can call it whatever you like. This is a thing which is flying towards an enemy. So you go add event and then collision, and then let's say you are having a collision with this goblin guy, this is the green guy, and then in here you actually do something. So let's say, for example, I could go and say instance destroy. Let's check it out. So basically I'm destroying myself, and now maybe you want to do something to the goblin, and therefore, for example, you have a keyword which is called other, which is kind of important to understand. And now you are accessing not the X object, but the other thing which you are colliding here. Let's say, let's push him quite far away, 10 pixels. So let's, bam. So let's do something like this. And if you don't understand the syntax, this just means the other X, so from the goblin, is the other X of the goblin plus a thing, but this is just shorter. And I guess more convenient once you are in the flow of programming. So let's say, for example, I'm throwing my X, bam, as you can see, the X is disappearing, but I'm pushing away this goblin. And basically I'm not pushing everyone, I'm just pushing the first one which I am hitting. So this is kind of important to also understand. This is kind of a thing. So this is one thing how you can do actually collisions. And these collisions are of course with the bounding box, and of course maybe you want to draw the bounding box of your, or you want to check it out where it actually is in game. You can just say draw rectangle, then bbox left top, and these are read-only variables. So you need to understand this because you can only read them out, and for example use them to draw a rectangle, but you cannot well, change them. So for example, you cannot say, hey, bbox left is equal to something. This is a read only, so you understand this. And here we come to another thing which is a little bit more advanced, but hopefully you can bear with me. Normally, if you're having, let's say, different enemies, let's say this is a object enemy goblin, object enemy AI, but they have some similarities. Let's say, for example, they're having an HP pool. Sometimes you cannot hit them because they're invincible, so you cannot spam things on them. And therefore, you produce an no sprite, but of course you can assign a sprite, but it doesn't really matter. You create a parent, and then you add here your children, or for example, you go into the child and say, hey, my parent is this guy here, and then it will inherit stuff. So let's say, for example, this goblin, as you can see, has his own create event. This is kind of important to understand. Let's say we kill this, and as you can see, there are already things which says object enemy parent. So we are getting stuff like, let's say, attributes and things from our parent. But let's say we want to create our own create event, but we want to take stuff in from the parent. So we go event inherited. This is kind of important to understand. So you're getting the good stuff from your parent, but here you change your own stuff as well, or add things which are just, well, specific, let's say, to our friendly goblin here. So this is one thing to understand. And for example, once we start the game, as you can see, all of them have some rectangles, and these rectangles are their bounding boxes. And as you can see, these are automatically set around. And of course, you can change them if you like. This is up to you. So let's say they are, they're automatic, but of course you can go manually. And let's say you just want it to be on a very small space. And for example, once we start again, then you will see, bounding box is smaller. And so this is quite interesting because You don't want it to be all around. Why is that? Because let's say, for example, you want to give the player some advantage, and a projectile is hitting the player and it's hitting the axe. Doesn't really make any sense. It's not hurting the player. Maybe you want to hurt him or do something to him once we are reaching the helmet and the body. So this just makes a little bit more sense. So here, this is what it does. This is the normal approach, what you can do for, well, for regular collisions, which is the easy part. Now we go into the more, let's call it difficult part. This is the advanced version of your own collisions, your own hitboxes which you create, because now they function as a as a collision, but on your own terms. Why is that so important? Let's say, for example, you're having this guy, but let's say you are meleeing, and now this is kind of tricky, because let's say your hitbox is something like this. It is, let's say, normally you would make a small hitbox, but then you're trying to hit an enemy in this area, which you have this thing. This doesn't make any sense, because you want to have your hitbox smaller. But let's say you make your hitbox bigger, then if somebody is hitting you, because the hitbox is just one set and this is it, then something is hitting you and he is, let's say, in his normal state, so something is flying in here, and you would get a hit. If you're thinking like, well, what the hell is this? Why am I getting hit? Because your bounding box is too big, and therefore this approach does not work correctly, and therefore you need to do something else. You create your own hitbox for this melee attack, and it just, let's say, something like this, and then it will flash for a few steps and then it's gone. And for example, if something is inside this box, let's go for the friendly guy here. Bam, if he's in there, then we get a collision and we can subtract HP or push him back or whatever you want to do. This is kind of important, and therefore once you do those collisions, they return an ID. An ID is basically the identification number to all the instances. Let's say you're just not having one enemy, you're having quite a few, and you don't want to, with this hitbox, destroy all of them, just the one which you are colliding. This is kind of important to understand. So let's say you're having this hitbox, which I prepared, and I put it in this game, and this hitbox is checking for something. Of course, there are different approaches how you can define this hitbox, because you can have different kind of collisions. So let's say you want to have a collision with a circle, so something which is in a radius or in a line or on just a specific point. Then you can do this as well if you like. So let's go, for example, these are the different kind of collision. There's ellipse, but I'm just gonna spare you this one. So let's say, for example, this is collision line and something is going in there, bam, you have a hit. But let's say, for example, you want to have a circle, so this is the thing, point with a radius, then something is in there, bam, we have a hit, and then we do something. And of course, well, the last one, which is the most common one, is the rectangle. So 4 points, and you have a rectangle, something is in there, bam, we do something. And this is basically the idea behind it. So let's go, for example, here you see some little illustration. And here we have a collision, here we have a collision. So basically in those things. And for that you need 4 coordinates, because, well, it's a rectangle, you need 4 coordinates, and then the stuff you want to collide with. And therefore this is the good thing, because we have an enemy parent. And if we are hitting the enemy parent, we are hitting basically all the other ones we'd like to hit if they are in the range. And we don't need to have a separate collision, which would be a waste of resources for every, let's say, sub, goblin axe thrower, goblin ice cream seller, and so on and so on. You just have a parent, and then you're hitting with the parent, and then if one of those guys is in this collision rectangle in there, bam, we do something. Well, this is just important to understand that therefore you have a hierarchy of one thing which is above, then it's affecting all the other ones if they are in this thing. And then of course precise, then of course it is slower. I always do that as 0, it doesn't really matter to me. And then if, for example, if you're having collision with yourself, which you don't want, I'll just go 0, 0. So how does that look like? Well, we just go collision rectangle. So if you don't know, so collision, and then you have collision circle, ellipse, line, point, or rectangle. And these are your options to create your own custom-made hitbox, and this hitbox is doing something. So here, what you can do, and of course there are different approaches, you just start with the X and Y position of this thing where you place it, and plus, let's say, some parameters. So it's every time relative to where it actually is. So, and then of course you go and stretch it out. So for example, what I just do, and as you can see, you see those parameters. Hopefully it is not too, it is of course a little bit better because this is just 1 point. This is the box, so this is the red one. Hopefully you can see it a little bit. And for example, I'm hitting one guy here, and even though, and maybe if you're paying attention, you're thinking, wait a minute, this collision box is on all those goblins here, but just one is spawning a 1. This is the, let's call it the not interesting part about collisions, because they are trying to collide and grab the first thing which is kind of there. So let's say, for example, I'm colliding here, but if I'm having a collision with 2, it will just get the first one inside. And this is of course a thing which isn't too good working, and there's a little workaround because it can only return 1 collision, and it's always checking, and so it will just grab 1, and then it will stay on 1. And if you're thinking, wait a minute, so basically the hitbox is useless, no, it is not. It's just so you understand that, for example, if you are having, let's say, an axe, and it would hit multiple things because multiple things on one thing, so with your bounding box, the traditional basic way, then it will just, well, hit on the first one, and this is basically it. This is a thing which you need to understand. It will just grab 1. Of course, there's a remedy on of this, and therefore you have collision, and then you see collision line, collision line list, collision circle list. And here you can have multiple things, and this is a thing which you definitely need if you have multiple instances on the same spot at the same time, and then you're creating a list. And this I will explain in a few seconds what it does mean. So let's go for the easier part. So you're having a collision rectangle, which I draw here, so I'll just call so you actually can see it on the screen, and it's being red. And therefore what it will do, it will return no 1 if there's no collision, so if nothing is being collided, or it will give you a ID. So once again, we are in here, it will return, and this is kind of important, instance ID on no 1. And this thing we basically grab, and therefore I just make a temporal variable all the time. So every step we're creating a new variable. After a step it will be discarded, and then it is just saying, hey, am I no 1? So no collision. Am I somebody? Yes, a collision. So what it is basically doing is just checking, hey, and then if we are actually grabbing something, which is great, then we can actually do something. For example, the ID which we grabbed from one of those guys, and what I do, I just create a pop-up which is just a thing, and then it's saying 1, 1, 1. It's just telling you, hey, I'm subtracting HP. And this is how you get in there. Of course, the same stuff applies to, let's say, collision circle. Then it will be the same if blah 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 is not no 1, do something with it, and your control is now in not with other but with instant grab, or whatever you call the thing which you are grabbing, and then you are putting a dot in between. So you take the instance and then you chain it together with those variables which are inside one of those guys here. Kind of important to understand, and bam. But here Now you're thinking, okay, so this stuff doesn't work too correctly. Well, it does work, but it is better if you are just having one collision, and most of the time it is good enough, because most hitboxes or most collisions are just with one thing, and then they pretty much work. Most of the time you don't have a clustering of things which are on one space, and therefore it doesn't apply. But, and this is the good thing, let's say for example you're having an explosion and then you definitely need to hit all of them, but then therefore you have a different thing, which is now the advanced version, the collision rectangle list or circle list. And here you need to understand this, what DS lists are. So we are creating a list and saving it in the variable DS list. Then we are making a collision, and this is just returning a number of collisions. So this is now not the instances. And then you're checking, hey, is the number bigger than 0? So if we're having more than one collision, it will loop through all those positions. So number I, so you need to understand what a for loop is. For beginners, you can now turn it off, because this, I guess, is getting a little bit too difficult. And then what it's doing here, it's just if you're having a collision, it will destroy itself. And now we'll see, this looks kind of difficult to understand. So let's do the same stuff here, and let's kill the regular approach. So let's take that away. Start it, and now you will see something which normally you would be expecting to see. Everybody is spawning the one above its head, because now all the collisions are setting in your list, and you're going looping through all of those positions, and bam, you're doing something to all of them, which is kind of important. So here, don't be confused about the invincible, because I just made it invincible parameter variable, so you can only hit it every, what did I do, every 40 seconds, 40 steps, yeah, so you're not spamming that thing. Whoa, let's go back to the hitbox. But how can you actually access those instances? Before we just had instance grab, whatever. Now you need to understand the syntax, which is here list. So these are all the entries from this list on the position I. So here we are just cycling through all the positions which are there, and this is how you get the instance ID of the thing which you collided. So this is, let's say, 0, 1, 2, 3, or however how many you are having, and then once again dot access and do something with the variables which are inside. Yeah, so for example, if I would be doing something like this, so let's kill it, so actually you can see the mess which I am creating. So once again, list, so this is the list we created, so this is the entry which I'm having, and with this I don't know how you call that, strich here, and then dot, because we grabbed the instance, its X position, its Y position, and then we're creating a pop-up. Now you will see quite a chaotic thing, because now I'm doing that every step, which is 60 times per second. Yeah, you cannot, oh yeah, this is quite a lot. This is definitely not optimal, and therefore I put in a thing which is just giving a little stop to this madness, just so you understand. But here, this is the important part. You need to understand this is the instance which you're grabbing on the position of I. Of course you can say 0 or whatever, but then you're just grabbing the first one, or whatever one you are trying to get. This is of course not what you want. And of course here, what is basically doing, once again, creating a DS list, checking, hey, how many entries which we're having. If we're having collision, save it to my list. So this is the list which we created. Then we are just returning a number. So this thing is just a real number, nothing else. Hey, we're having a collision. Great. Loop through all the entries, and then, well, do something, do the action in there. Bam, 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 of course. If you go through here, it's doing the same. Of course, you can just ignore that thing. And here's where the action is actually happening, because I just copy pasted it, bam. And here you want to do some actions. And then in the end, it will just destroy the list, because, well, you're just creating memories, a memory spot, and then you're killing it because you actually don't need it. And this is happening 60 times per second, which is quite a lot. So yeah, hopefully now you understand what bounding boxes are, how you can actually set up your own hitbox, which is the thing which GameMaker Studio is actually doing for you. So basically, what is GameMaker Studio doing? It is doing... what did I kill? Basically, GameMaker Studio is doing this, the collision rectangle normally. But you can of course make your own, because, well, you are in need of a little bit more spice. So hopefully you understand how that works, why well, hitboxes are important, and how you can actually set up your own stuff, and how you can actually grab those instances which are in there and do something with them. So that was pretty much it. Hopefully you enjoyed it and you're still around, because I guess this thing is... How many minutes am I in? Quite a few. Let's end this. Have a good one and enjoy the sun. One up indie.